Do I need a trauma therapist? And if I do need a trauma therapist, then how do I go about finding one? That is what we're going to be covering in today's video. And part of why I'm putting this video together specifically to address this issue is I cannot tell you how many beautiful and also wounded people who are trying to heal are reaching out to me, hoping that I can see them or point them in the right direction. I wish that I could see everyone who reaches out to me, but it's not only is it not humanly possible, but because of state regulations that give us our credentials per the state that we live in, I can't see people that don't live in my home state. So I want to put a video together to help people to get to the right connections, right? And when you think of it, getting people from point A to point B to point C, okay, point B really matters. I want to start out with the reality that there are many different types of mental health professionals. You have psychologists, you have psychiatrists, you have people who have doctorate in psychology, you have social workers, you have marriage and family therapists like myself, licensed professional counselors, and, then there's coaching and so forth. But in the clinical realm, that's kind of the cadre of the available disciplines that study psychology. And I just want to say that any mental health professional is going to have a basic understanding of trauma or PTSD, right? They can all diagnose it. They can all treat it at some level. That being said, it's very clear that when you get specialized training in trauma, that there is a difference in the level of care that you can provide. And I'll just say for myself, as an example, the way that I treat trauma, the way I approach it, is radically different than before I specialized in it. I remember I thought I understood trauma. I thought I understood PTSD and dissociation and so forth like that. I had no clue what I was dealing with until after I received specialized training. I also want to say that on the flip side of that, there's a both and, meaning that even if someone has all of the training and all of the knowledge that they need to help someone, it doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to be a good fit, which is what is so frustrating for so many of us. 70% of the thrust behind the change that people experience is related to the relationship that a person has with their therapist. It's really important to find someone that you have a good connection with. But the question is what makes treating trauma so different than going and seeing someone who, let's say they specialize in CBT or cognitive behavioral therapy, or DBT, which is dialectical behavior, which is this ability to hold a both and. There's some of these cognitive models, and there's some really good cognitive models out there. The question is why aren't they adequate? Well, we need to take a look at a basic understanding of how trauma is working within the brain. I would highly recommend the book, The Body Keeps a Score by Bessel van der Kolk. It honestly, and I've recommended it in other videos, I cannot recommend it enough. Van der Kolk's findings show us that there are different parts of the brain that are responsible for different parts of our experience. So for example, you have the Broca's area. The Broca's area is responsible for speech, the ability to articulate words. Then you have the visual cortex that's responsible for how images are encoded in the brain. And lastly, you have the amygdala, which is responsible for the emotion and the feeling that we experience as human beings. And I want to really simplify this to make one simple point, that when we are reliving a painful experience, the part of our brain that is seeing and the part that is feeling is aroused. It is triggered, and we are reliving the experience with incredible detail. But here's what's interesting. The Broca's area, the area that's responsible for speech, that shuts down. And our ability to articulate what we are seeing and what we are feeling is severely limited. And the reason why that matters is because when you treat trauma, and I say this from experience week in and week out, if you are dealing with the part of the brain that cannot articulate, then you have to take a different approach. So it doesn't really make sense that I would put somebody in an environment or a situation where the demand characteristics are asking the part of them that is not able to perform. So in other words, if you don't really have words, then why would I use an approach that involves a ton of words? I can't tell you how many people they're like, I went in and I talked and I didn't get better. I went in and I talked for a whole hour and nothing really changed. And so I stopped seeing a therapist. I can't tell you how many times and how frustrating it is when people don't get what they need and they're not going to the person who can give it to them. They waste their time, their money, and then what happens is they're like, you know what, I don't know if I want to go back to therapy. So for example, when you go in, most times with kid therapy and so forth like that, they'll use sand tray therapy, because here's why. Kids, we know kids, their ability to articulate is not really formed, it's not developed and so forth like that. And we see it with kids all the time. When you do sand tray therapy or you do play therapy, art therapy, it works with the part of the brain that sees and feels without creating a ton of demands on the part of the brain that has to explain it. I personally specialize in EMDR. That stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It is an incredibly effective model for a lot of people. Not every single person responds well to EMDR, but many people do, because again, it involves a part of the brain that sees and feels, and we work with the ability to articulate. That comes over time, and we don't need a ton of words to do the processing. That is part of the brilliance of EMDR. And part of the reason why I like EMDR is because it works with big T trauma and little t trauma. And what I mean by that is sometimes we have these traumas that aren't as significant as others, but we have to have a modality or a treatment method that helps to reprocess the experience in order to drive down that reactivity in a person. And EMDR does that very well, regardless of the experience that you're bringing in. For some of us who feel like, you know what, I like CBT, I like the cognitive shift, or I like, the ability to change my quote unquote schema, EMDR works with cognitions, but it does it in a way that is integrative with the emotions. And there's this reprocessing element that I think is very relational and something that I think is very healing. I would also recommend a treatment modality called IFS, or internal family systems. It is a tremendous theory. And why I recommend it is because it's very intuitive. I've actually had the creator of IFS, Richard Schwartz, on my channel before. I did a video with him as it relates to legacy burdens. Anyway, IFS is something that I would recommend that most people, even if you do EMDR, do, because what I like to do is I like to take EMDR and do what we call parts work. And I know you might be thinking, Kyle, can you explain this a little bit more for us? Can you explain EMDR? Can you explain IFS? Yeah, in another video. Now, one of the questions that I get from people is, Kyle, do I need to see a Christian counselor? Some people, maybe they're a part of a specific denomination and they don't want to see people outside of that specific fellowship and so forth. Here's what I would say to that. Everyone has their own way of doing conscience and all of that. And some people have conscience hangups when it comes to who they see professionally. Here's what I would say to that. Your discipling relationships, in other words, everybody is supposed to be, in relationships with people who are helping them become more like Jesus. That's what we call discipling relationships or spiritual mentoring relationships. That's responsible for your spiritual formation. That is not going to be replaced with counseling, period. And I would also say, just because someone is a Christian and they are in counseling, it doesn't necessarily make them good at that per se. You can't just make something better just by adding Christian to it, right? And so what I would suggest is make sure you have a solid discipling relationship for your spiritual formation. And then over here, we can address how the trauma has affected your body. Again, we want to help the nervous system get well. Well, unfortunately, when we go through a traumatic experience, that experience is stored in our bodies, not just our psyche, but in our bodies in such a way that keeps us triggered. And to be honest with you, people don't need to be a Christian in order to help you to resolve that. Now, what comes after that in terms of spiritual formation, your counselor is not going to be the one to help you to do that. You're going to need to, again, find a discipling relationship, which is something you should have anyway. One of the big questions that I get is, Kyle, how long do I give it? If I go see a therapist, I get the appointment booked and so forth, and I find that, I'm just not making a connection. Again, going back to that, 70% of the therapeutic relationship is related to change. That's enormous. So if you're not clicking or there's not a connection with you and your therapist, it's okay I tell my clients, if you're not feeling this after 3 sessions, I can give you a referral. What we don't want is to quit after 1 session, because sometimes what that is that's just the fear, and maybe we've never done therapy before, or maybe we've had a bad experience of it and so forth. Give it more than 1 session would be my recommendation. And sometimes I get people who ask, Kyle, what if I want my spouse to come in and we want to get marriage counseling because we have trauma in our relationship? I think that's a great idea. I always like to start with an individual therapeutic relationship though, right? It's 2 whole people, not 2 half people that make a whole marriage. So, and sometimes you have to work harder on yourself than you do the marriage, at least for a while. But I find that what's really helpful is when you have 2 individuals, let's say there's a lot of damage, and you have 2 individuals that they have their own individual therapy, and then they have a couples therapist. And I know that sounds like a lot, but the systems that I've worked with that do the best, They really, for a season of time, they really commit to having therapy be a priority in their lives. So in our practice, we specialize in dealing with, we have kids and adults. Well, on the kid team, they will have folks who will see the kids alone, and then they'll have folks who do the parenting stuff with the parents and the children. And it's really good. And then they talk and they strategize, and it's a really helpful approach, especially if, let's say you want your child in, but your child needs individual therapy, and you also need to strengthen your relationship with their children. We can break that up into what we call teaming, and it makes it very efficient. We especially see this with folks that we have who've gone through incredible trauma as it relates to the foster care system, who've been adopted from horrible situations, orphanages, and so forth. A team approach is a winning approach. So let's say you come across a therapist and you reach out to them and you have some questions for them. Well, what are some questions that you would want to ask someone who specializes in trauma? Because anyone can say that they specialize in trauma, but let me give you a couple of questions that I think will help to clarify whether or not it would be a good fit. The first thing that I want to know is I want to know what their approach is when it comes to treating trauma. And the biggest thing that you're looking for is someone who works with the body. Again, Bessel van der Kolk's book, The Body Keeps a Score, is so illuminating because it's basically saying trauma gets stored inside of our bodies. And there's certain parts of our bodies that house or become sort of this shared real estate for these painful experiences. And if you don't have a therapist who works with the body effectively, again, if you don't move it in the body, you don't move it. Like when my clients come in and we've been working through their trauma for a while, we can actually feel the arousal. We can feel that stored negative energy leaving the body. And if the therapist, the reason why I say if the therapist works with the body, then you're in good shape, is because if they work with the body, then that lets me know in terms of like this sort of chain reaction of all the other things they have to know about trauma. If they know how to move it in the body, that lets me know that they have the requisite training in terms of treating trauma. Someone called me and they're like, hey, what's your approach? I would say EMDR. Anything else? IFS, internal family systems. They can go, and I would give them websites. Hey, go to imdria.com. You can go to EMDR. I would give you books by Francine Shapiro. The Body Keeps a Score by Bessel van der Kolk. I wouldn't want to overwhelm them, but I would give them possibly if they wanted some stuff on IFS by Richard Schwartz. I've got, again, does your therapist have the ability to sort of on command give you some resources that can get you started in the right direction? The other question that I would ask them is a little bit of a qualifying question, but you got to be careful on some of this because it's the relationship that's really the most important. But what is their approach with dissociation? And if you're talking to someone who has a pretty good understanding of dissociation, they likely have a better than average understanding of how to treat trauma. So now we're at the part of the video that I think everyone is kind of wanting to know, okay, Kyle, can you point us in the right direction? Absolutely. The first website that I would recommend is IMDRIA. And what it is it's the International Association for those who practice EMDR. And I will make sure to put all of this in the description below. But if you go to their website, they have a page where you can locate an EMDR therapist in your area. Another option that I would recommend is timeline therapy. This is something I've actually done. I've done EMDR and I've also done timeline therapy. This is an alternative for people who maybe don't take EMDR maybe the first time or it doesn't seem to work with you so well. Timeline therapy, I think, is another option. I would highly recommend Crescenda Jones. I'll put her information in the description. She's someone who specializes this and actually used this as a foundation for a book that she wrote. And then there are some other treatment approaches that I think have been very helpful that my colleagues have gotten trained in. There's neurooptimal, there's brain spotting. I would even recommend TMS for people who struggle with chronic depression. Again, all of that I'll put in the description as well. And lastly, I want to make mention of a couple of associations that I'm going to put in the description that I think will be helpful, specifically as it relates to, let's say you have a niche need. So let's say you and your partner, you both are in your own individual therapy and you want to find a marriage and family therapist who specializes in trauma. Well, you can go to the LMFT, the American Association of Marriage and Family Therapists, like myself, and you will find therapists who have certifications or treatment in trauma. Or you take the APA, the American Psychological Association. Then you have the association as it relates to social workers and licensed professional counselors. Again, I will put all of that in the description. And the reason why I'm not going through all that is because I will cover that in future videos. Again, I just wanted to make a very brief video on do I need a trauma therapist and how do I go about finding one? I will have future videos that will cover more of these things in detail, I'll see you next time.